The Bengals have made a ton of moves in free agency, but how much better are they? For more on the Cincinnati Bengals, former Bengals and Lions running backs coach Kyle Caskey is with us. Kyle, I appreciate the time. Let's dive into this because the Bengals have made a ton of moves specifically on defense in each of the past two off seasons. But let's look at this past couple of weeks. They swap out a Carl Lawson for a Trey Hendrickson, William Jackson for a couple of corners. How much better is this defense?
I think they got better in a couple areas because they really addressed the secondary for one. One of the guys that I really believe is going to be a good player is Hilton, Mike Hilton. I really believe the guy that they got from the Steelers. Just over the time when I was coaching against him, him being the nickel corner that comes in the slot in their sub nickel defense. He is a pest when it comes to blitzing. I mean, he's all over the place. He is a really good blitzer. He's not a big guy, but he gets involved in the run game. I think they really made a good sign with that one. Some of the other guys, Awuzie, I believe that's how you say it, from
Awuzie, yep.
Awuzie from the Cowboys. The one thing about him is he got picked on a lot, and I believe Eli Apple is kind of the same way. Those guys got picked on a lot in their time, and that, you look at it and they got a lot of tackles and whatever the case may be, but that just means people are throwing more at them instead of the other corner that's on the field. So, with the William Jackson departure, the one good thing about William Jackson is, you never really heard people talk about him. It's not, he made some interceptions here and there, but that's a sign of a good corner. It's like a long snapper. The less you hear about a corner, it's probably pretty good because that means nobody's beating him. Maybe you'd like to get more plays out of them, but at the time, that's what you want. You want people to go lock down a receiver and not have to worry about it. So I do think that was a little bit of a departure. When it comes to the Trey Hendrickson versus the Carl Lawson thing, they're two different people. They're two different players. They're two different styles. Hendrickson is a longer I know he's not an outside linebacker, but he's got that build and that kind of play style to him where he's going to go and really set the edge. And when he comes around the edge, he's got quick hips and he's got quick hands, and he can dip and rip underneath and make those kind of moves to get to the quarterback. But Carl Lawson was like a Tasmanian devil. I mean, that guy, I just remember when we first got him and he comes into training camp, we had no way to stop him. It was like when we were trying to block Geno Atkins. We were having a hard time just getting plays off in training camp. And then you watch him and he was a lot the same way. Now, if you look at both of them, I believe both of them had 20 sacks in their career. Mm-hmm. I know Hendrickson had 13 and a half last year. We played against him this past season when I was with the Lions, and he had a sack against us, but it was on a scramble. Stafford had stepped up in the pocket, and I know he got a sack on that. So it wasn't like he beat us around the edge or anything like that. And he was going against Taylor Decker, who is one of the best left tackles in the league right now. And so there are some differences with him. And I know he only played on the right, from what I saw. I think he moved inside at times and different things, but he was pretty much a right defensive end. But I guess you pair him up with Sam Hubbard and see what you can get going on the edge with those guys. But I think he's a good player. That's a good addition, but they're just different.
Yeah, there's no doubt they're different. And it is funny. You think back to Carl Lawson's rookie year and he looked different. Speaking of different, fourth-round picks don't look like that. And that's something. I went on a Jets podcast earlier this week, and I think they were excited to hear me talk about him and the impact he had early on in his career.
They should be excited to get him. He is a good player, and they should be really excited to get him. You're not going to keep everybody, but I'm just telling you that guy's special when it comes to, getting around the edge and the type of just you got to really be patient with him. And a lot of O-linemen don't want to be patient like that and wait on him.
It's funny because Trey Hendrickson was the most expensive free agent with the $60 million commitment. And who knows if he's here for that long. We know how NFL contracts work. But Mike Hilton, you raved about him a little bit. And I think fans were ecstatic about him. Maybe the most excited outside of the offensive lineman, Riley Reiff, because he plays offensive line, and we'll get to him in a bit. Yeah. But when you watched Mike Hilton, you mentioned his blitzing, but what else stood out? How can Lou Anarumo potentially use him, and what elements does he bring to a defense that some of these other corners that the Bengals have had in the past don't?
Well, I think number one, one of the biggest things that he brings as a positive to the Bengals is he's not playing for the Steelers anymore, so that helps out, number one. Number two is, he does play, he's really a slot nickel corner, but if if you needed him to go outside, he can still go outside. They played a lot more. Now don't get me wrong, Pittsburgh plays man coverage, but Pittsburgh has a lot of zone blitzes. So a lot of the stuff he was doing was based on zone coverage, which, is fine. He can fit in play maybe if he needed to go back and play safety. I know the safety position, with the Bengals right now, they've got a couple good ones back there. So, if he needed to, he could go do that. I believe he's one of those guys that you can almost put him anywhere you need to on the field because of what he can do, like with the blitzing kind of schemes and different things. So if you're in dime defense and you want him to play the dime linebacker on a passing down situation, that just gives you an extra guy in the box that is used to playing the run. So he's got some versatility to him that, maybe some of these other guys haven't had, but, I feel like like I said, that was a good get for them.
You mentioned Awuzie has gotten picked on in the past, and you look at him, I don't think anyone's going to mistake him. He's a former second-round pick, but no one's going to mistake him for a number one corner. Mike Hilton, versatile, certainly a piece, not a number one corner. And then Trey Waynes comes back from injury, probably a guy you've seen or you saw when you were in Detroit, when he was with Minnesota. Is he a number one? Because if not, I think the Bengals have a bunch of number two cornerbacks that they're going to be starting this season.
I think you're leaning more towards that, having more, number two guys starting, but they all have the ability to be number ones, and they all have been number ones on a team that they've been on. So you do have experience there, which is important. You don't want to just throw somebody in there. You go draft a rookie, and you see how those go. I mean, when you draft, anybody early in the draft, especially, which that's hard for those guys because a lot of pressure is put on those guys when they first come in, and they will get picked on because like those receivers are going to say, okay, little guy, we'll see what you got now. And, it's tough. So it's good to have experience. I do think it's going to be a new look out there because there are a lot of new faces. So it'll be interesting to see how they gel. It seems like they're all getting along. I follow some of the reports online, and it seems like they're all, pretty excited to be here and pretty excited to be playing with each other. So it's always a good thing to have some camaraderie in the back end,
No doubt about it. And I do think it fits vision wise what Lou Anarumo wants to do. It'd be a tough physical zone type secondary almost, and not do as much man-to-man, which obviously William Jackson III was a more of a man-to-man guy who's going to probably succeed in Washington. So it's going to be interesting to see how it plays out. But let's switch gears. Let's talk about offense because that's your specialty. That's what I think a lot of people are worried about right now with the Bengals because they've added one offensive lineman in Riley Reiff. They did re-sign Quentin Spain to a one-year deal, but not as much movement in the trenches, at least on the offensive side, as most were expecting in free agency. How concerned should Bengals fans be at this stage right now of the offseason, given what happened to Joe Burrow and how bad the offensive line has been, not just in 2020, but really the past 4 or 5 seasons?
Yeah, I don't know if there's going to be as much, angst as there should be. You look at it and the fans are like, yeah, we got one guy in Riley Reiff, but just remember, you also brought Frank Pollock back, and that to me, and for one, some of these guys that played, back a few years back when Joe Mixon led the AFC in rushing under, when Frank Pollock was the O-line coach,
Who was the running backs coach then? I don't know.
It was, I like the guy, I can't, let me tell you, but we're not going to get into that one right now, but we'll let that one roll. But no, so Frank does a really good job in developing guys and getting the most out of them. And I really believe that was one of the biggest pickups for them. But going into who they've signed, Riley Reiff obviously has been a good player for a long time. First round pick. I mean, the guy was taken really high, but he is a little older. He's been in the league since 2012. But he has played a lot of games and he's been fairly durable, except for a couple of years ago. I believe he had an injury that knocked him out for about 4 or 5 games. But other than that, I mean, the guy has been, if you watch him, he fits well in an outside zone scheme because he comes from Minnesota. Minnesota has been that Stefanski, kind of Kubiak, because Kubiak's been up there. So there's been some flavor for the outside zone, which is really what I know Zach likes to get into with the outside zone there with the Bengals. So I think he'll fit well in that. And obviously pass protection. He, like I said earlier, he's patient. He's got really good hands. He knows how to use his body to kind of contort the defensive lineman into using his, the defensive lineman against himself, which is what really good tackles do. So what Whitworth was really good at. So you're kind of getting a guy like that. Now he is moving to the right side. because I believe Jonah Williams is coming back, should be full speed this year. And, you got 2 good tackles. So you got a good base with the tackles. And, going into the inside, it just, I know you got a lot of guys in there. There isn't a lot of experience if Trey Hopkins comes back, and then Billy Price, don't go past him yet now. I mean, with Frank and everything. So, I would just say, just have patience with it right now. If I was Joe Burrow, I'd feel a lot better right now about where they're at, as opposed to where they were towards the end of the year. And then we'll see what happens in the draft. Everybody's talking about, Penei Sewell, and now he's a tackle. The kid opted out after this last year, so it's kind of hard to say. I'm sure the pro day and all that, the workouts are going to be important because you need to see where he's at. But I've watched him, and honestly, like he could go in and play guard. If you remember, I go back to Whitworth when Whitworth first started. Whitworth started as a guard, with the Bengals. So, and then he moved out to tackle. So you're talking about a guy who could possibly come in like that, go to guard, get used to the NFL. And then whenever the time comes, and it's time to move him out to tackle, then he moves out to tackle, and he's been playing, and you solidified, part of your line with that. So, people will say, well, why you don't want to take a guard that early, but you're not really taking a guard. You're taking an O lineman that's going to fit in and then possibly, grow into a much bigger position over time.
Would you take Sewell 5th if he's on the clock, and who else, who knows who else is there? But I think a lot of people view it as a no-brainer for the Bengals because of their offensive line issues. Is it that cut and dry for you?
I think it has to be, because your best player is behind the center, and he got hurt last year. And I'm not saying that that's, anybody's fault. It just happened, and you need to do everything you can to keep Joe Burrow on his feet and have him playing at the best of his ability. And the only way you can do that is to give him protection, give him a run game, get those things going in front of him, because this kid's special, and we all know that. So I think you got to do whatever you got to do to make sure that he has everything he needs, and it starts there.
So the argument against Penei Sewell, and not necessarily against Penei Sewell, but just against going all in on the offensive line, Kyle, is that the Bengals just need a functional offensive line. And if they get to average, then if Joe Burrow has weapons, then they can score 30 a game on offense and be this really dynamic team, which would be the argument for a Jamar Chase, a Kyle Pitts, Devontae Smith, Jalen Waddle, one of those dynamic playmakers with the 5th pick. Is there any truth to that? And how big of a difference is it for offensive play callers when you have an average offensive line to below average offensive line, like the range from below average to above average and great? Is there a big difference between average and great, if that makes sense? And obviously the Bengals have been neither of those over the past couple of years in the trenches.
Well, like we talked about with the tackles, and you get Riley Reiff, and then Jonah Williams back, and then you got a couple of guys in the middle that are pretty functional and played well over time, and with Coach Pollock coming back, I think he can get those guys back up to where they can be. And then, like you said, the guard positions, okay, you're kind of sideboarded. If you can have a center and a tackle, and then you could kind of fit some guards in there that just play along with them. And I think you can be functional. Now, if you don't have somebody to throw it to on the outside, or a tight end, you can run over the middle and trust that he's going to, big body that thing up in there, then it's tough, and especially if you want to, get a good passing game going with Burrow, which I know they do, with the departure of AJ, the departure of John Ross, Tyler Boyd's still there, and Higgins, and you got a couple good guys in there, but I think you do need to add some pieces in there, whether it's those early receivers, a couple of those guys are a little smaller and faster, and then, Pitts is a tight end I watched that kid play quite a bit, just being Aggie. I watched a lot of SEC football, and, the kid made a lot of plays. So, I've been around the Alabama program a little bit, and I can tell you those guys are ready made. Those receivers, they'll be ready to go. So if you get either one of those guys out of Alabama, now the one guy, the Heisman winner, he's small, but the dude can run now. The dude can run. Waddle's coming off that injury, but he apparently came back and played just fine, so I think he'll be fine too. And the LSU kid, Jamar Chase, just watching LSU, I mean, LSU puts out talent every year. I mean, you could probably field them. You could field them in Alabama and put them in some division somewhere in the NFL, and they'd probably be competitive at times. So, I just think you do need to put guys around them, but you can be functional. I think there is a difference with a really good, solid five that play well together. Instead of having five big name guys in there that you put your entire money into, and now you bankrupt your program, but you got a great offensive line, versus putting your money into a few of those guys and then getting the other guys to play along well with them. I think that's probably where they should probably be headed, more than, trying to go out and just break the bank on the whole line.
And so do you take Sewell at 5? Is it still that clear cut? Cause it's tough because it's a deep tackle class. And so if it's me, like if Chase is there, if it's Chase and Sewell, but I know I can get 80% of Sewell in round 2 at 38. And I might be wrong on the percentages. I'm throwing a percentage out there, but I think I would rather do that because Jamar Chase to me might be the AJ replacement, might be your number 1. And I don't think I'm finding that in round 2. Like as good as T Higgins is, I don't think he's AJ Green's replacement. And by the way, I don't think there's going to be a T Higgins in the second round in this draft either. So that's kind of how I view it.
There, people will always say, "Oh, you can find talent in the late rounds." The receiver talent, in particular, there's difference between first round and everybody else when it comes to receiver talent. Now, you can find a diamond in the rough every once in a while, and if you look at the mass majority of them now, O linemen, you can start to find those later because a lot of guys pass up the linemen once you get to a certain point in the first round, and then they'll come back to them. And I mean, even if you look back on it, Clint Bowling, I believe, was a 5th round pick, and the kid played for, 8 years for the Bengals and was very, very productive, So there are guys that you can pick up later. And if you feel like you need, and these are the conversations they're having right now, they got the whole group in there, and the line coaches are fighting for Sewell, and, the receiver coaches and probably the whole rest of them are fighting for the receivers. And, it's just, everybody knows they need a lineman, but at the same time these are the conversations they're having, and it'll be interesting to see what they do. And, who knows if they get the right offer, you might trade down, who knows, you maybe get something else. And then you can still get the guys you want, and get more picks out of it. But there's a lot of things that can happen there.
Do you ask Joe Burrow? I mean, you ask him about Chase, obviously. And you ask him about Marshall, who's a 2nd round prospect, late first, 2nd round wide receiver out of LSU as well. But do you ask him, hey, do you want to play with Chase or would you rather us take Sewell? Do you even go down that road?
I believe with a guy, like if you really believe Joe Burrow is going to be what Joe Burrow is going to be, then you don't need to say, hey, you're making our decision for us. But just go in and say, hey, give us your opinion on it. We'd like to hear what you say. Can't guarantee you we're going to do it this way, but it'd be good it makes the quarterback feel like he's involved because he is. I mean, that guy's running the team on Sundays in all reality. When he's out on the field, he's running that offense. He's running the team. And if he's a really, really good one, he's helping the defense out too, when it comes down to it. So, you just got to understand those guys can have a lot of pull, and, it's good to involve them, especially that high of a pick.
You mentioned the run game, and let's go there because to me, Joe Mixon, much like Carl Lawson, and we mentioned it earlier, the moment Joe showed up, it was like, oh, he's different. Just his size was different. You could just tell by the way he carried himself, the way he walked. He was like kind of a star in right away. And he didn't really talk to the media much as a rookie. That
was by design, by the way.
No. And I get that. No, I get that. But he just kind of shied away. Even sidebar conversations, not a fan of that. But you could tell he had that star potential. And to me, now we're entering the 2nd contract. It seems like there's untapped potential. He had that injury plagued year last year. What does he got to do? Does he just need a line? Is that the difference? Is that what's going to unlock Joe? Because if we're talking about Joe Burrow back and a decent line and Joe Mixon is playing at an elite level, then I think this offense could be pretty good.
Yeah, and Joe Mixon I really think the best of what Joe Mixon has is yet to come. And I mean, that says a lot because he has led the AFC in rushing in his 2nd year. And it's one of those things where, sometimes guys have a down year or two, and then, then they come back and something clicks, whether it's the, getting a little bit more in tune with the line, So if you look at the past couple of years, I think there's been quite a few offensive line combinations over the last couple years, with different guys in there. And that does kind of mess with the backs a little bit when it comes to just having that timing with everybody and really trusting who's in front of you. So I know he's going to like Riley Reiff, and that's going to help out a lot, and having, Jonah Williams back. I think, getting those edge guys, because when you run an outside zone scheme like they like to run, that's very important to get the displacement. And I think those guys can do that, and he'll trust that and become much better, much more. It'll look a lot more fluid to you. It won't look as forced. So once he starts just running and doesn't have to think about every other cut, he'll be just fine.
Last thing for me, at least I think, we'll see depending. But as far as the offensive line goes, I think the one thing they need, because you have Quentin Spain at left guard, potentially a whole battle with Xavier Sewell at left guard, Billy Price, Trey Hopkins at center. You're fine if Price has to start for a few weeks. Like you said, it's not really a big deal as Hopkins comes back. And who knows, maybe they sign another veteran or draft one. But right guard, there really isn't one. And Spain played there some. Xavier Sewell played there some last year. But I think a lot of Bengals fans are a Trey Turner signing away, right? A former Pro Bowler who was dinged up last year away from feeling really good about this offseason. And I know it's kind of, or this free agency period, at least going into the draft. And I know it's kind of silly that one player could kind of swing the pendulum, but they realize how important it is to protect Joe Burrow. They are going to make one of those signings. I hope, but is it irrational from me, from fans, to look at it as, man, you better sign one of these starting right guards, because if not, then we're going into the draft needing one of those guys. And maybe it does end up being Sewell, but is that irrational to think that they should bring in one of these veterans, these proven guys that could potentially start tomorrow if they needed him to start and they were playing a game?
There's nothing irrational about that. I know everybody wants to say they need to do this, they need to do this. One of the things I just want to make clear is there's so much more that goes on in buildings behind the scenes when it comes to doing research on guys, talking to agents, working guys out, meeting with free agents, all those kind of things, that there's probably a lot of things that are going on that nobody even knows about. I can promise you there is. And, even with the Bengals, that everybody thinks, they sit on their hands. They actually don't. And they got a plan for it. A lot of times you always hear people saying set the market or whatever the case may be. Well, the market's set now. So, when it comes down to it, they'll figure out a way to make it fit if that's something that they want to have in the plans. And I just know over time the Bengals have been, and, for a little while we were pretty good. We didn't win a playoff game, but we were pretty good at building through the draft. And, then they may be in that mode at this point. I don't know that. Again, I'm 2 years removed from being in there listening to those conversations, but just knowing how they do things, there's a lot of work going on behind the scenes, and don't be shocked if something happens, because they're on top of it. I can promise you that.
Yeah, it would be nice to see another addition in the trenches or two. Kyle, this was a lot of fun. I look forward to talking to you again before the draft.
Yeah, anytime.